welcome to this wonderful briefing. We're so glad to have all of you. I know others are going to be adding on as we go here. And U.S. Israel Education Association, for those of you who are stepping in and new to our organization, we're educating and serving members of Congress, taking senior leaders of Congress to Israel, featuring going through the area called the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. And we have quite a bit going on Capitol Hill. And one of those leaders, and I'd like to just mention the leader, the one that's really leading out front in Congress is Congressman Mike Lawler. And we're so honored to have you with us today, Mike, from New York, 17th District, Congressional District, and serving on House Financial Services Committee and House Foreign Affairs Committee. And it looks like nearly 50 congressional caucuses. So it sounds like you might not sleep at all.
That's for sure.
Yes. And then also with us to follow is Coach Bruce Pearl, the legendary Titan for Auburn basketball and the Titan for Israel. And looking forward to hearing from both of you all today. Well, I'm going to start with just a few questions, if it's okay with you. Congressman Lawler, you were in Israel not too long ago, kind of at the beginning of the war, and maybe 3 weeks ago, and you actually had an incredible visit. You met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You met, I think, with the war cabinet. You went down to the areas where this attack took place in southern Israel. What was your key takeaway from the trip, and kind of what was the main message that has continued to reverberate with you?
Well, thank you, Heather. I appreciate you having me on, and thank you all for joining us. I was in Israel just 3 weeks ago. This was my second trip to Israel this year, the first being in May with Speaker McCarthy to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Israel and watch the speaker deliver remarks at the Knesset. And then this one, a more solemn visit to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, our U.S. Ambassador Jack Lew, as well as families of the hostages. And it really was a powerful trip. The Department of Defense would not take us, and so we had to fly commercial. And the Department of State would not allow us to stay overnight. And so it was a very condensed trip in which we flew through London, and then to Tel Aviv on two back-to-back red eyes. But while we were in London, before we got to Tel Aviv, we went and toured Churchill's War Room. And we saw, a lot about, obviously, Winston Churchill, but the lead up to World War II and the Holocaust. And in that moment, I really thought about those events and the parallels to today. But the importance of not being a bunch of Neville Chamberlains in this moment. Instead to be Winston Churchill's, victory at all cost. And I think when you look at what is happening around the globe, the unholy alliance between China, Russia, Iran, and what they are doing to undermine and destabilize the free world, and this terrorist attack on Israel. It is important for the United States to be resolute in our support for Israel. We were the first nation to recognize Israel's right to exist 75 years ago when 11 minutes after its founding, President Truman recognized Israel as a nation. And so we are their oldest friend, and they are our greatest ally. And we need to be resolute and firm in our support of Israel, and continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. When we met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant, we watched a 21-minute unedited video, the raw footage of the terrorist attack on October 7th. And frankly, it's a video that everyone should see so that they fully understand the barbaric behavior, the vile, disgusting conduct of Hamas, and what they did on October 7th, brutalizing, murdering, slaughtering women, children, babies. We watched 138 lives snuffed out in that video. And it was horrific. And I think if people truly understood what occurred on that day, they wouldn't be calling for a ceasefire.
Right.
There have been 8 ceasefires over 15 years, each time violated by Hamas. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that seeks to not only eradicate and eliminate the state of Israel, but the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And we must understand that when we're making these decisions and understand the consequences of Hamas's actions on that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's extraordinary. Well, thank you for that. And I know that that film is circulating. It's actually going to be in Birmingham next week, I believe. And I know that people need to take advantage to see it. And let's remember that it was Hamas who filmed it all. It was not the Israelis filming it. It was Hamas filming their psychopathic behavior. And let's also remember that it was well planned. It was not something last minute, even though they were high on cocaine when they crossed the border. Those thousands of troops, 80% of them were high on cocaine. It was not just a race to get through the border. This had been planned for several years. And so we really look at this, and it's really unbelievable. It's wonderful to see the backing of the United States and the Congress and your leadership at this time. And one of the things that I want to turn and address is that, of course, when we see Hamas and we understand that, while they have a presence and their location primarily is Gaza, they're also in the West Bank. They're also in Iraq. They're everywhere. So there's a lot to deal with, not just in the coming months, but really in the coming years. And I think we understand that their primary funder, 93% of their budget's coming from Iran, and that they're supporting the terrorist proxies around Israel. So you led an extremely, I think, in my personal opinion, besides the aid package, the most important act to pass through Congress since October 7th is the SHIP Act. And I'd like you to take a few minutes to explain it. It's remarkable because it passed with bipartisan support. And just in layman's terms for all of these people online, and you've got some pretty smart people here, but try to explain it to us. What does it accomplish? And do you think it's going to pass the Senate?
So Iran is the greatest state sponsor of terror, as we know, and a lot of their funding comes from the sale of Iranian petroleum. Mm-hmm. And since Joe Biden took office, Iranian petroleum sales are up 59%. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the reason for that is because the administration reversed some of the actions of the Trump administration with respect to holding the purchasers of Iranian petroleum accountable. We already have sanctions in place on Iranian petroleum. Mm-hmm. We do not use Iranian petroleum in the United States. But China is the largest purchaser of Iranian petroleum. And they have evaded many of these sanctions. So the intent was, with the SHIP Act, to put in place secondary sanctions on anyone who knowingly, transports or refines Iranian petroleum. Mm-hmm. And so that bill passed overwhelmingly. I believe there were over 60 members to vote against it, but it passed overwhelmingly. And it is critically important. And a companion bill to that I've introduced in Financial Services Committee passed through the committee just a week later. It would apply secondary sanctions on Chinese financial institutions for facilitating the purchase of Iranian petroleum. So this is critical. If we're going to combat the terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, that are proxies for Iran, that are receiving their funding, their training from Iran, we need to cut the funding off at its source. And that is the Iranian petroleum. And so it is critically important that we deal with that and address it. And so we passed it through the House, and the Senate needs to take action. And this is where, Senator Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader from New York, the highest ranking Jewish official in America, should be pushing for this to pass immediately.
Hmm.
Frankly, I don't know why he hasn't brought it to the floor.
Yeah.
It is a common sense bill,
Hmm.
and it's one that should pass overwhelmingly.
Yes, well, it's so important, and we've got some people on here who may can add some pressure to that, and we appreciate so much your bringing that bill forth. Let me ask you a specific question about it because I know it's interesting for people. But when we had tough sanctions under a Trump administration, did these sanctions that you're looking to impose, the secondary sanctions, harken back to that time period and try to, enforce that, or what is this new?
Well, it's codifying a lot of what the Trump administration did into law. They were naming the purchasers, and so it was allowing for the sanctions to be, enforced. The Biden administration stopped naming the purchasers. China is the greatest purchaser of Iranian petroleum. It is totally insane, and so we have made it very clear in putting this bill forward that no one should be evading sanctions here, that Iranian petroleum should not be purchased, and that anyone who does indeed purchase it is going to be held accountable. Iranian petroleum was down to about 400,000 barrels per day. It's now at 1.5 million barrels per day because of the lack of sanctions enforcement.
Incredible. And so the counterpart to this in the Senate, what is the bill in the Senate called?
It's the same bill.
Okay, yeah, okay, great.
And the intention, again, this bill is straightforward. We introduced this before October 7th. This bill has been being worked on, throughout the last 5 months or so. We had over 230 co-sponsors in the House before it was brought to the floor, and I want to thank Steve Scalise and Speaker Johnson for bringing this to the floor, because it was a critically important piece of legislation to advance, especially after the terrorist attacks on October 7th.
Yeah, it's really amazing. People are going about their busy lives, Christmas shopping, going to Costco. It's so important to be supporting our Congress right now with this critical piece of legislation. And thank you for being out front leading it. Well, the government funding deadline has been sort of punted to the new year. So the aid for Israel sort of is hanging in the balance. And there was a standalone bill that passed the House, which was great. But now that aid is sort of tied up in the Senate with funding to Ukraine, Taiwan, border security initiatives. What do you think is going to happen with the Israel funding? And what's the path forward for Congress to ensure that Israel has the funds to fully prosecute this war? And that includes munitions, which is the cry of every leader over there, is we've got to have more munitions. We need to know that that's coming. What do we do? What do you think is going to happen with the funding?
Well, it's obviously critically important that we get the resources to Israel as quickly as possible so that they can replenish, and that they know they have the support to prosecute this war. This is going to be a long battle. It is a battle of good versus evil. There is no moral equivalency here. And those of my colleagues that are trying to hold Israel to a standard that they don't hold anyone else, it's absurd.
Yes.
And, you hear people like Bernie Sanders saying that there needs to be conditions on this aid. We're not putting conditions on aid to Israel. We will support them. Now, the challenge in the United States right now and in the Congress is that our debt is approaching $34 trillion. We have spent money we don't have, and have been doing so for decades. And it is getting worse. And in the first 2 years of this administration, they increased spending by $5 trillion in 2 years. So it's unsustainable. And what the speaker has said by putting the funding in the bill, how we were going to pay for it with the IRS funding from the prior Congress, he has put a marker down to say, we need to pay for this. Here's how we propose. The Senate has done absolutely nothing. Chuck Schumer has not done one thing all year. They are not passing bills. They are not advancing on issues, whether it be the border, whether it be energy. They can't pass anything through the Senate. And so a lot of the focus has been on the House, but the reality is that they need to actually pass something. We have passed aid to Israel, and we will absolutely work to get that done. But the Senate needs to move. And frankly, they should take up a standalone Israel bill and advance that so that we can negotiate and get it signed into law. What the speaker has said on Ukraine funding, which I support, is that we need to deal with our border crisis here. And so I think it's incumbent on the Senate, again, to actually negotiate and actually pass something that deals with our border crisis while advancing aid to Ukraine. But Israel should be a standalone, and it should move expeditiously. And I think Senator Schumer, as the highest ranking Jewish official in America, has a responsibility to do that. And frankly, there should be more pressure from others outside of Congress on him and on the Senate at this moment to act, because the House has actually passed something, and it was a bipartisan bill. And all of the aid that was requested was funded. So that's something that I think is important at this moment.
Well, this is really good for this group to hear it, because you've got a good group here that likes to act on things like that. And I think that it's important to understand the SHIP Act and really pressuring Congress on that, and the aid package to Israel, a standalone in the Senate. And so that we're hearing you. I wanted to ask finally, I know that you have a stop and have to get going, but I wanted to ask that, it seems that, what we're watching, it seems like, and really the SHIP Act is a bit, evidential of this. It seems like maybe there's some bipartisan support finally coming around the need to sanction Iran, to deal with that monster in the Middle East. And I want you to comment on that. We've got an anti-Semitism issue in the United States that we didn't realize that we had, that is so horrific that it harkens back to World War II days. We didn't even know it existed at that level. And we've got support for Israel. We've got sanctions that need to go on Iran. And I'm just looking at, and I'm talking to senators and congressmen on both sides of the aisle. It seems that we're getting a little bit of a pivot in some bipartisan support as a result of the war. Can you talk about that for a minute? What do you think is going to happen?
No question. So, look, when I went to Israel in May and we met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said he came back for two reasons: to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. The first bill that I passed was to create a special envoy for the Abraham Accords so that we can normalize relations between the United States, Israel, and these Arab majority nations. We want them all working with Israel. And the United States obviously plays a pivotal role in that. And so we want a special envoy that can help facilitate that. But Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. And when you look at the challenges in the Middle East and the threats to peace and prosperity, it generally stems from Iran. And so we need to hold them accountable. We need to cut off the funding sources that fund the terrorism perpetrated by Hamas and Hezbollah and others in the region. And we need to normalize relations. On top of that, you look at the anti-Semitism in the United States and around the globe, and it stems from education. It's why in May of this year, after the CUNY Law School graduation speech, I introduced the Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campuses Act, which would defund institutions of higher learning of their federal dollars, including student aid, for those institutions that sanction and promote anti-Semitic events on campus. In addition to that, I just introduced the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which would require the Department of Education to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism and its contemporary examples for its discrimination enforcement cases. We need to crack down on the anti-Semitism that is raging in our classrooms, that is permeating into every community across this country, and really make sure that people understand it's not acceptable. Anti-Semitic hate crimes are up significantly, not just since October 7th, but in recent years. And in New York State, 98% of those anti-Semitic hate crimes are not prosecuted. So there needs to be consequences for people's behavior and conduct. I know that's a novel concept, but it is something that needs to happen. And so we need to look at how we can facilitate that at the federal level and at the state levels across the country and hold people accountable. But it all comes back to education. When you look at what occurred on October 7th, those Hamas terrorists were taught to hate. They were taught to hate Jews and to want to kill them. I'll close on this. When we watched the video, there was a young man, maybe about 20 years old, based on how he sounded, who called his parents in Gaza to tell them, "Mom, Dad, I just killed 10 Jews with my bare hands. Mom, Dad, I just killed 10 Jews with my bare hands." Bragging to his parents praising Allah. That is taught. That is taught.
You are so right, Congressman Lawler. We need to crack down, and we need ways to hold accountable, from China with their, and how they're going to, deal with how we're going to hold China accountable for what they're doing with the Iranians, and how we're going to hold our universities accountable, and this seems to be an issue because we can pass laws, but then when it comes to enforcing those laws, it seems that we have a little bit of a weak system.
Yep. No question about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate that. You're doing a great work. I mean, talk about a man that's leading out front. We're all clapping for you. We're behind you. We'll go to work on some of this.
Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you. And stepping up to the batter's place is Bruce Pearl. And Coach Bruce Pearl, you're known by everybody here, and we just appreciate you joining us. We know you're in your big basketball season and running from thing to thing, but just want to hear from really one of your primary things. I know that you are carrying a weight right now, because while you're out coaching and you've got a massive attention to a huge job that you have, you're also carrying Israel in your heart. You're carrying this horrific evil that we're seeing in the United States called anti-Semitism on a level we've never seen. It's scary, and I want you to talk about it. I want to hear some of your ideas. What do you think needs to happen? How is it affecting you as a Jewish man? We can't. Oh, wait, we can't hear you.
There we go. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Heather, for the opportunity, and appreciate all the information that we're getting to be able to, stay up to date on this. How has it affected me as a Jewish man? It sort of affects every day, but honestly, it's been no different for me my entire life, because my entire life I've grown up with an awareness of anti-Semitism and some of the challenges that we faced. Again, being born in 1960, 15 years after we discovered that 6 million of my brothers and sisters were murdered just because of their faith, that reality was very, very real to my family. And so obviously it's been very real to me my entire life. The creation of the state of Israel is a fulfillment of God's promise. And I'm so grateful to USIA and its faith-based support of the state of Israel and God's promise. the war right now was something that was unprovoked. It was genocide. Israel was, viciously attacked, and is in a position where it has no choice now but to defeat its enemies. It's tried for 80 years to live in peace with a neighbor that really did not want to live in peace, or at least a segment of that population. The hope, obviously, is through the Abraham Accords. The hope, obviously, is through the heroic efforts of Israeli Arabs, of Druze, of others that are living in Israel, just like we are here in the United States, a love of our country. There still is a great foundation of the possibility through peace as we move forward. However, the ideology, the leadership, and the flat out lies and propagandas that have obviously been taught, educated, as Mike Lawler talked about. That's why U.S. Israel Educational Association has never been more vital, than it is right now. First and foremost, to educate Congress, but also to educate educators, to educate universities, to educate pastors and rabbis and people, to educate us so that we can win our own battles at the kitchen table. Mm-hmm. Because this is obviously, what we are up against. The Jewish people have a responsibility. I had 50 or so Jewish kids over at the house last night for Hanukkah, even though Hanukkah doesn't start till I think Wednesday or Thursday. It's finals week, and we just wanted to get them together beforehand. And I told the kids, I asked them to do a couple of things, but one of the things I asked them to do is we have a responsibility to break down the stereotypes. Because we are not believers that Christ is our Savior, we don't have the guarantee of heaven forever. And so the way we were brought up, and our belief is that, through observing the Sabbath, which we don't do enough, through reading the Torah and being in prayer, and studying the Bible and reading the Bible and living the Bible, which we don't do enough, and then through mitzvah, through the good deeds, those are our only chances at the grace of God at the end of the day. So therefore, the Jewish people have a responsibility to continue to live the way that would give us an opportunity to dispel all the lies and the falsehoods of what kind of, what people we are. So that was my message to my students today: is wear it on your sleeve. Don't be afraid to have your chai, wear it outside, but also the responsibilities of breaking down those stereotypes by just being really good people, by being the children that God chose. Or here's what I told him. I said, I'm not sure God chose us. I'm not sure, but I know he chose Abraham, and we are his descendants.
Mm-hmm. Really good. Well, Bruce, go ahead.
I just was going to say, as far as the future is concerned, Heather, one of the things that I can't see us doing, we recognize, obviously, having been into Judea and Samaria and worked with the things like the Judea Samaria Chamber of Commerce and your organization supporting Palestinian business leaders to try to help them create a better life for their people. We recognize that there needs to be more autonomy in Judea and Samaria for the Palestinians. However, Israel does not have a partner for peace, either in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria or in Gaza. And I do look to the leadership of some of those Abraham Accords countries like the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, or some of the other countries like Jordan and Egypt that are in a decent place with Israel right now, to somehow find some leadership that the world can work with.
Yes.
I want to give everybody hope to be able to rebuild what we have right now. Hamas must be destroyed. Hitler had to be destroyed. It's embarrassing to me, to see so many Americans, so many people in the media. I get people want to support the freedom fighters, and they don't want lives being lost, and they're against the war. We've always seen forever people protest against the war and killing, and I understand that. Mm-hmm. But when John F. Kennedy was willing to go to World War III because Russia had a couple dozen missiles in Cuba that was just sort of there, he said, you either get those missiles out of Cuba, you put them back in a boat, or it's going to be World War III.
Mm.
Israel has been living for 80 years under those conditions. They're sitting there right now with 120,000 missiles in southern Lebanon, pointing at them anytime Iran says the time is now. And so I believe what must happen is this enemy must be defeated right now. We've got the carriers there. We've got the United States support there. That support is going to wane. As Mike Lawler talked about, we don't have the money to fund Ukraine. We don't have the money to fund Israel. America is getting tired of paying for everything, and so are Americans. And so, to me, we need to be acting sooner than later, giving Israel all the support she needs to go ahead and destroy the enemy, and then be able to rebuild. And I know USIA is going to be in the forefront of there. If 1,400 Israeli citizens could be murdered simply by cutting through a fence, the threat of the Iranian nuclear thing is there. We all must understand that President Obama and his policies and President Biden and his policies funded this. They created this. We can look throughout our history, especially since World War II. How many times have we screwed it up? How many times have we as a country gotten it wrong? And we're getting it wrong in Israel and Middle East right now. President Trump, through all his faults, got it all right. And we've got to somehow get back bipartisan to those policies. And I agree that we need to be putting way more pressure on the Senate. And that's one of the messages I heard from Mike Lawler today. And I'm going to call Senator Britt and Senator Trumbull and begin to pressure them as to what can we do. I've got messages into several other people that work with the senators that Schumer needs to be pressured, obviously, into doing something. And we got to make sure through our educational efforts that we elect executive and congressional leaders that understand this, or this world is going to be an even more dangerous place than it already is.
It's really true. It really is. And, you know, when evil has reared its ugly head to this degree, and we have seen it, sometimes it's the way that we end up seeing redemption. And we see that in the story of Hanukkah. We see that. It was the worst day of Israel's history to have Antiochus Epiphanes walk into that holy, sacred place and require a sacrifice of a pig on the altar. And just imagine that, the audacity. And it came suddenly, it came quickly, and it was evil. But in the midst of that, you had Matthias, you had the Judas Maccabee, who rose up during that day. He understood the times that he was living in. He took action. They had pitchforks in their hand instead of guns, but they stepped out and did something. And I think that's really what we're stepping into is Hanukkah. That's where we are. We need active soldiers, active people in this arena. And sometimes it's easy to get up in the morning and just walk by the mirror and say, you know, I'm not much. I guess I should go Christmas shopping.
Right, Heather, silence is complicity. And one thing that's taken place right now in Israel is the country is unified. They're unified in this fight against good and evil. And one of the things that I pray is happening here in this country is that Jews and Christians are coming together and standing on the exact same side of good, versus evil, and as we are commanded, to do, and and so again, I'm hopeful that we can continue to be strong. I'm so disappointed with all the Americans that are held hostage. With the death that has taken place to Americans in this battle, how America isn't more unified in its anger, just like Israel is unified in its anger against the enemy. And I honestly think, Heather, whether it be through Western civilization or more importantly, through this right here, through this right here. This is the truth, and this is what we all must stand upon. And so I encourage everybody that's on this call and thank them, for their support and their commitment, their voice, and they're not being silent. And and just I'm just grateful.
Yes, we all have to find a way to have a voice inside us. And I think that one of the greatest things we can do, and it's, it doesn't take much to go look up your congressman and senator and just send a note. They've got it arranged online that way. In fact, I'll have our team send out the way that we can do that. We need to get to our Congress and be really, really putting forth, this is really important that we get this done, this aid bill done, that we pass the SHIP Act. These are things that we can do just as citizens, and this is our part during this season. Let's be vocal. Let's understand where we're headed. Well, Bruce, thank you for being with us. And I just want to say to everybody on this call, your support means the world to us. We are going to be taking a congressional tour to Israel over the Easter holiday. And we are going to be taking a senior group of leaders that are, and probably Mike Lawler is going to go with us. But we are taking a group with us. We've got briefings on the Hill forthcoming. We've got a major piece of legislation called the FDA Bureau bill that's being introduced, most likely within the next 2 weeks, into the House Energy and Commerce Bill, bipartisan support. That again opens another foray for the Abraham Accords nations. It's going to clear away. It's going to bring in a massive resource, pharmaceuticals out of China into the Middle East. These are things that are ahead of us. This is US IEA today playing our role, trying to lead in the midst of this crazy thing. And then I'd lastly like to say that as bizarre as the situation is in Israel, I was on the phone with Mayor Eli Shaviro just a few days ago, and he made it clear to me. I said, Eli, what about all the Palestinians that are working in the Barcon industry? You've got thousands and thousands of people. And he goes, oh, they're going to work every day. I said, what? In the middle of this war, in this prosecution of war, also inside Judea and Samaria, you've got Palestinians going to work? And he said, absolutely. The whole nation has to works with the Palestinians. We've got 150,000 Palestinians that work with Israelis. So remember, we have to keep that in mind as we go into the future. My suggestion is that we pray in, that we begin to think and envision the future with the Palestinian leadership, rulership over Gaza. Really does need to be a group of technocrats, people that have a democratic mindset, completely unaffiliated with terror organizations or beholden to terror organizations. And it has to be about business and prosperity, just like a regular rule. And I really believe that the potential is there. Not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying the potential is there for us to be able to see a redemptive turnaround in the midst of this very evil situation. So let's pray to that end. As we go into Hanukkah, it is about miracles. It's about a rededication and of our own lives. And so I'd like to just close this in prayer. Thank all of you for joining. Father, we want to thank you that you're the God of the light and not the darkness, and that you come to invade darkness with your light. And we're asking for a breakthrough for the nation of Israel today as they prosecute this war, that they would be able to get to the Hamas command centers, that they would be able to eliminate and take out these Hamas leaders, the military power, the political presence. And we thank you that you're going to give them victory, even over Hanukkah. Over Hanukkah, you're going to give them the power and the victory to overthrow the evil of their day. Thank you for going before us and giving us a way to work with our nation, that the United States is standing with Israel, and we want to do our part. So we dedicate ourselves to that in your mighty name. Amen. Well, thank everybody for joining. We sure appreciate you. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. Oh, by the way, we have actually another opportunity next week. We're going to have Richard Goldberg join us. He's the guy that I follow on Twitter, and everything he does, every time he speaks, I am sitting right on the front row. He is the expert in the world on Iran. And it is it's brilliant. Of all the things that we're thinking about, Iran is extremely prominent in our day. We need to understand Iran, how they're functioning, how the United States is relating to them. Rich Goldberg is the person to hear. So he's going to be with us next Tuesday. We'll send information out to you. Don't miss him. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for being with us.